this presentation, I will be discussing how one 21st century filmmaker has kept the Spanish Revolution alive through fantasy stories involving revolution and disobedience. This filmmaker, Guillermo del Toro, has said about monsters and their importance to humanity. Monsters were created by mankind to explain the universe around them, and when we became civilized, the universe within us. Before we get into the film, let's discuss the Spanish Revolution and Civil War. In March 1934, peasants seized a number of lands that the government had previously promised them in a past election, and by February 1936, there was a massive electoral victory for the left, which caused a lot of fear on the right. By July 1936, Francisco Franco staged a military coup that threw Spain into a civil war. By 1939, Franco had become dictator, and would remain so till the end of his life in 1975. Now, on to Guillermo del Toro. He was born on October 9, 1964, in Guadalajara, Mexico, and notes that he witnessed a lot of violence as a child. But, beginning in his early teens, he began his career as a filmmaker. By 1985, at 21, he was a producer on the film Donna Herlinda and Her Son. By the early 2000s, he was cemented as a filmmaker and respected widely. In 2001, he created the film The Devil's Backbone, which is set in the Spanish Civil War in western Spain. And by 2006, he directed Pan's Labyrinth, which discusses Spain under the dictatorship of Franco during World War II. Pan's Labyrinth is set in Falange, Spain, and the Falange Party is just the fascist party of Spain. The characters that I'll be discussing are Captain Vidal, Mercedes and Dr. Ferriero, Ophelia, who's the main character, and the Pale Man, one of the fantasy elements of the film. Captain Vidal is the embodiment of Falange's fascism. He is obsessed with order and cleanliness, and this is shown through the number of times he is seen shaving in the film. And towards the beginning of the film, he is always shown in perfect military uniform. Guillermo uses this as a metaphor by the deterioration of the captain's physical appearance throughout the film as he loses more and more control of the situation. Vidal is prone to using violence in almost any situation, whether it's with his stepdaughter Ophelia, local farmers, or when torturing revolutionaries that he has captured. Captain Vidal's main interest is forcing obedience, no matter the cost, no matter the order. Mercedes and Dr. Ferriero are the complete opposite of this. They embody choosing what is right over all else. They do not relish in cruelty. In fact, they are some of the only characters in the film completely innocent of cruelty. They're both self-sacrificial and good examples of why critical disobedience is important in the face of immense evil. Their most important contribution to the story is how they protect both Ophelia and her mother, who are two of the most innocent and weak characters in the story. Ophelia embodies both innocence and hope. She's chastised constantly for her dreaming and her obsession with stories and fantasy. She's compassionate, but she hates Captain Vidal. This is shown by how happy she is to hear that she has disappointed him. On the other side, she loves Mercedes, and shows this by protecting her when she discovers that Mercedes is working with the revolutionaries. Ophelia helps connect the fantasy world with the real world in the film, and with this, she also shows us how some of the fantasy characters are mirror images of characters in her real world. The example I will be looking at is the Pale Man. He sits in front of a large feast on a long table that never goes bad, but he will never eat it. He uses it as bait to attract poor and hungry children. In essence, he preys on the innocent and relies on suffering and the cruelty of the world to survive. In this way, both he and Captain Vidal are very similar to each other. They are parasitic in nature, they thrive on cruelty, and they are there to punish disobedience. For Vidal, this is attacking those who are against the fascist Spain. For the Pale Man, it is those who choose to eat from his table. Both characters are incredibly cruel and very apathetic. Not sure why that's here. Let's move on. Okay. Now I want to show you a brief clip from the film that I feel perfectly encapsulates the entire message of the story. But first, I need to describe the events that led us to this point. In the moments before the scene, the captain is shown torturing a Spanish revolutionary. He calls in Dr. Ferriero in order to bind the victim's wounds and prepare him for more torture. In this moment, the doctor has a moral crisis, thinking back to his Hippocratic oath, which states, "Into whatever homes I go, I will enter them for the benefit of the sick, avoiding any voluntary act of impropriety or corruption." And to the doctor, keeping this man alive although he's basically already dead, just so that he can suffer more, is too much to do. And this leads to this scene.
¿Por qué lo hizo?
Era lo único que podía hacer.
No, hubiera podido obedecerme.
Hubiera podido, pero no lo hice.
Pues hubiera sido mejor para usted. Eso lo sabe. No lo entiendo. ¿Por qué no me obedeció?
Es que obedecer por obedecer, así, sin pensarlo, eso solo lo hacen gentes como usted, capitán.
In his own words, Guillermo del Toro created a fable of disobedience and choice. In his story, he uses the courage of the Spanish revolutionaries as an example of how disobedience becomes more than necessary when facing evil. Pan's Labyrinth is a story of the dangers of conformity, violence, and the monstrous side of our species, like Franco and other fascists and authoritarians. I will close this presentation with a quote from Guillermo del Toro. That type of obedience, where you find refuge in the corporate, or the political, or the religious majority, is such an absolute, despicable cowardice. I think every time that you turn towards a truth that is not your own, that you confide the guidance of your soul to somebody else's choices, you are making a huge mistake.